Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video, and today we're at the Bike Shed show in London at Tobacco Dock for what I think is probably one of the best, if not the best, custom motorcycle shows in the world. And while there are lots of interesting builds from amateurs and custom shops around the UK and Europe, there's also quite a few interesting little displays from some of the mainstream manufacturers, including Ducati with their Scrambler stand. Now what's really interesting here is we've got a couple of prototypes that could be an indication of models to come later down the line for their production lineup, and so in this video we'll have a good look at both of them with all the details. Now first up, we've got this cafe racer inspired bike which they say sort of follows on from the 2017 Ducati Scrambler cafe racer, which has now been discontinued. It's been designed by their Centro Stile, which is their design center in Italy, and I think it has to be said, this is a very good looking bike. Scrambler Cafe Racer, as a name, you might think is a little bit of a contradiction. How can a Scrambler also be a cafe racer? But what Ducati says, this actually shows the flexibility and versatility of the Scrambler platform. You've got a brilliant air-cooled L-twin engine that makes about 70 horsepower, nice and torquey, lots of character to it, and then a nice lightweight flickable chassis that they've just enhanced a little bit with a few mods on this version. Now the big change is that most of the icons and bikes like that actually get an 18-inch front wheel, which is slightly oversized, and while it does help to give them a little bit of that slightly retro aesthetic and also a slight Scrambler vibe, of course with a bigger front wheel you're going to compromise a little bit on manners in terms of road handling. This one though gets a 17-incher, so it should feel a little bit quicker to turn at the front, and they've also fitted it with some sporty road rubber in the form of the Pirelli Diablo Rosso 4s, whereas the standard bike comes on their MT60 RSs, which are a little bit flat track inspired, semi-knobbly, and so not quite as sticky and grippy as something like this. Now also on the three variants of the Scrambler that are available at the moment, so you've got the Icon, you've got the full throttle, you've got the night shift as well, they all come with fairly high and wide handlebars to play into that sort of Scrambler vibe, but with this one they've gone for clip-ons to get you a little bit lower at the front, and also they help to tuck your arms in a touch and give you that more sporty sensation when you're riding the bike. Now unfortunately we can't sit on it and say how it feels. I wouldn't imagine that there are any major changes to the seat height or the pegs or anything like that, but just with these clip-ons they are risen up a bit just above the tops of the forks there. It'll get you forward, it'll get you a little bit lower, and I think it'll suit the sort of aesthetic of the bike. Speaking of which, I really think they've done a very nice job of the fairing on this bike. They say it's sort of tank mounted, so it flows into the tank, and it sort of reminds me actually of a fairing kit that was available for the Vitpillen 401. It's got a similar vibe, but just with that kind of Ducati flair and treatment. It's got a little bit more detail to it, and with that champagne base coat on the paint job, the red, white and black graphics over the top, I think it just all makes for a very striking looking package. Now they say it's a little bit of a tribute to bikes like the Ducati Panther or 750SS, that era of bike that do have fairings with a slightly similar aesthetic, and also they've given it a single seat cover at the back, and they say it sort of recalls a classic Panettone saddle of the 1970s. Now look, I think we can all agree that this is a great looking motorcycle, but as for whether it will become a production Ducati Scrambler, well on the one hand, like I say, they did have that cafe racer version back in 2017, so it's not completely unimaginable, but on the flip side I suppose the cafe racer production bikes have died off quite a bit recently. You can still buy, for example, a Royal Enfield Continental GT, but this year Triumph announced that they were winding up their Thruxton Cafe Racer with its final edition, so after this year you'll no longer be able to buy it, and BMW's R9T Racer was discontinued a few years back as well. Generally, I would assume it's because these bikes aren't necessarily that comfortable, so the idea of them and the looks of them are maybe more appealing than the reality of owning them, but then again, who knows, it looks really brilliant, and so I'm sure plenty of people would be sniffing around it if it was in dealers. Now next up we've got this much more rugged and utilitarian looking bike, which is potentially, I suppose, a little bit of a successor to a bike like the Desert Sled. That's another bike that was discontinued recently, but it's a much more off-road capable version of the Ducati Scrambler, and I will say a little bit of a cult bike. The people who rode it really loved it and said it was such a good off-roader, to the extent where someone, Henry Crew, took it actually round the world successfully and came came back absolutely glowing about the way the bike rides. This maybe could be something similar. It's not quite as functionally off-road focused. The Desert Sled had stuff like taller suspension and a reinforced frame. This really looks like the Icon, much more with an accessory pack fitted. But it has to be said, aesthetically, it really does make a bit of an impact. It's meant to be a little bit of like a post-apocalyptic take on the Scrambler. It's got a bit of that Mad Max vibe to it. And so you can see they've removed the tank covers and fitted them with little racks so you can strap on luggage. Also, they've removed the pillion seat and there's a removable rack back there as well. So it's really built to carry stuff. They've even fitted a little tool bag on the side of the engine there as well. And then, yeah, you've got some of those more typical Scrambler-y, off-roady styling cues like the knobbly Pirelli Scorpion Rally tyres. It's got spoke wheels as well, still with the 18-incher up front. I think these might be off the Night Shift, actually. A high front mudguard at the front there, and also a high-level Termini silencer, which is very typical, of course, of the Scrambler genre. I really do like the paint job on this one as well. A little bit of a pop of bright yellow, just with the logo on the tanks, gives it a little bit of a lift, and they've tied that in with the paint on the shock spring as well. And the only thing that stands out to me as a little bit counterintuitive about it is it does get the same sort of clip-on style handlebars as the Cafe Racer that we've got over there. Now, it makes sense to be low and over the front with a sporty bike, but with a bit of an off-roader like this, although they are quite sat up, I don't think it quite goes along with the intended use of this bike, but it does give it quite a cool look. Personally, I'd be going for the big high wide bars that you get as standard on the Icon, but overall I really do like the look of this bike, and I think it's a little bit more achievable if you wanted to build your own from a base Icon model than something like the Cafe Racer, which is going to take a lot of skill and time to build your own bodywork. So yeah, a couple of fantastic prototypes from Ducati here. We've also got a full walk around of the show soon that's coming to the podcast channel, so head over there and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to know from you guys what you think of these two bikes down in the comments below, and which one you'd most like to take for a spin. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.